This is the Messiah Hour with Ari Lewis.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. Thank you for joining us. At any time, you can email the program, messiahhour@gmail.com, and you can also send a donation via PayPal to israelsportsradio@yahoo.com. This episode is dedicated to Rebbetzin Henny Machlis, who passed away last Friday. Their family's done tremendous chesed in Jerusalem. That's really an understatement. I kind of don't know where to begin. They're kind of modern-day Avraham Avinu, Sari Manu, so obviously our prayers and thoughts go to their family, and the show is dedicated to them. You can also go on the internet and share stories about Rebbetzin Machlis, and you'll have to Google for that, but there are emails you could send regarding the stories. We're going to talk a bit about the English language today, which is pretty interesting because as my side job, I'm an English teacher. So I'm pretty curious about this topic. On the line to discuss this is our favorite rabbi from Tzfat, the co-author of the book The World of the Ger, Rabbi David Katz. Rabbi, how are you doing out there?
Hey, Ari. It's a pleasure to be here with you and all your listeners, and it's good to be back on the air with you as always.
Yes, indeed. So let's talk about the Cambridge Encyclopedia of the English Language, because English is considered in many ways a bastardized language. There are a lot of things in the language that make no sense, but it's the most popular language in the world. Over 2 billion people speak the English language. So let's talk first about the Cambridge Encyclopedia of the English Language.
I'm going to take issue with what you just said, Ari.
Okay.
You claim that 2 billion people on the planet speak English?
Well, that's not my claim. That's what they told us in training.
I'm going to tell you nobody on the planet speaks English.
Oh, well, they didn't say that. Well, why do you say nobody?
That's the facts. That's how it is. It's a shock. It is a shock. This is one of those things, man. It's like, there's no such thing as Ger. Then all of a sudden there is Ger. Hey, why didn't they tell us that in Hebrew school? Right? We've been lied to on many levels. On every topic, we have been given a world that has no wisdom in it, when in fact there's only wisdom in it. That's a Kabbalistic thought, it's a Torah thought, it's a realistic thought. So I'm going to now introduce to you and the listeners this fascinating reality of why nobody speaks English. Ready? Pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, tell me why no one speaks English.
So before I get, I want to attack it at different angles, okay? I'm going to introduce, I want to jump in the middle. It'll give guys context. But like you said, I just got done reading and studying the Cambridge history of the English language. And it tells you a language from basically Latin, how it became the Old English language, to basically your mumbo jumbo that you put on Facebook. Instead of the word you type the letter U. Right? So from, I hate to say the pun, but A to B, that's what we're going to cover. And that's why no one speaks English, is because how do you get from A to B? And the answer is you don't. You don't go from Old English to you type in the letter U in place of the word you. You cannot call that a language. I know that means nothing, but here we go. I'm going to ask you a question, Ari Lewis. How do you like that?
Yeah, sounds good.
Did you learn Shakespeare in high school or college?
Yes.
Did you like it?
I like some of it, yeah.
Do you think you understood it?
I felt like I understood most of it, yeah.
You really think you understood Shakespeare?
I felt like that. I did. Yeah.
I know for a fact you didn't.
Okay. Well, why is that?
It turns out, as I learned in this Cambridge book, right? Here's where the narrative begins. Shakespeare was one of two of the greatest innovators and influences on the English language in the history of the English language. Meaning, the language evolved from, the classics, from dialects, common vernacular, commoners conquered by English-speaking people, taking on loan words. The biggest contribution at first was the Bible. Translating the Bible into English was the biggest burst of English words. What do you call them? Lexims, I don't know how to pronounce that, but it was in the book. I didn't do the phonic looking it up on every single thing I learned, but the Bible introduced most of the words. Same thing with Arabic and the Quran. Same thing in Hebrew with the Chumash. This is apparently how linguistics work on a halfway, what do you call that, conspiracy level. It's not so much conspiracy. It's just where does language come from? It comes from law. And what is the Torah? Book of law. So everyone's followed that template from Moses onwards. It's a copied thing. The next influence that was almost as great upon English was Shakespeare. He introduced more words with perfect context. You know, as they say in music, perfect pitch. He had perfect context. And he introduced all these words. He is a rival to the Bible. He is that great in what he did for the English language. So the book showed a list of examples of words that Shakespeare introduced. And I don't have it right here in front of me, but let's just say it gave an example of 30 words. Right, words that you use every day, that you only got those words because of Shakespeare. Meaning he understood, I guess, the Latin and the etymology and just lexicology. He understood lexicology to fashion the word and the life concept with meaning. He knew meaning, extracted meaning, and made a Webster's definition entry through his playwriting abilities. You with me so far?
Yes. Okay. Right.
Then there's a list of words they had that didn't enter the English language. I made a Facebook post about it a couple weeks ago. I forget what the words are now. But it sounds like flip, flop, fling, flew, as George Carlin would say. But he made up words. And they didn't get acknowledged and adopted in English language. And so when you read that in your class, your English class, you didn't know what you're reading. Because you never saw those words ever again in your life. I highly doubt you went to Google, because Google didn't exist back then. And so the interesting thing is when you look up those words, they have like a Shakespeare online dictionary, how Shakespeare meant those words. He had Ruach HaKodesh, a certain way, maybe in Klippa, but because the words, they're so rich, because they're life concepts is all they are. And I made a silly sentence with them on Facebook. And everyone's like, what does that mean? So I said, look it up on Google. Because I know there's their dictionary. Somebody looked them up and actually plugged in the meaning. I had no idea what I was saying. I just copied in his words. And the sentence made sense. It made sense. So it's like you can't go wrong with that kind of language. It was so strong. But what bothers me is Shakespeare's not a beautiful language by what you would call a beautiful language, because you don't even understand it. What is interesting and what should be taught in schools and what is beautiful is it is so rich with wisdom. What he did, what his job was, what it was remembered as an influence to the English language, when the master innovators, truly impressive. But we lose it when we ask, why does it say ye and where art thou? So the Cambridge Encyclopedia explains to you, what does it mean art? What does it mean thou? Why do religious documents still translate as thou? So when you get into the wisdom of the etymology and the lexicology, it is such a fascinating wisdom. And you realize English is not what you speak as you know it. It's not what you learned. It's not what you thought. There's an entire wisdom so great. I never saw wisdom so great in my life. And it's with us every day in our world, and no one recognizes it. It really is the Matrix. We speak and we have meanings. We have no idea the lexicology behind it. And if we did, communication would be vastly improved.
Again, this is the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest is Rabbi David Katz, talking a bit about the English language. So where exactly did English come from?
So, again, this is a rough estimate. This is paraphrased. This is half my opinion, based on the book, adapted from the book. So please don't be. It doesn't say that, right? Okay, we know that. Again, this is just my 1 hour on the Ari Lewis show take for the listeners out there. You got Latin and Greek, and it coming from the Hebrew, and I guess the Nordics were, again, I'm speaking very base here. We're not getting technical. But there was an Old English. I mean, some of the letter characters look different. And the book brought like poetry by some Viking commander, so, and it was just kind of rough and rudimentary, very harsh language. It wasn't, it was very almost like binary code. And they, for some reason, it just was, they wanted it to become popular. Now, where my opinion comes in, based on my own knowledge, research, wisdom, whatever, the church was Latin-based, which was Greek-based, which was Hebrew-based, which is Bible-based. Obviously, it doesn't take too much stretch of the imagination to connect Bible, Hebrew, Pope, Latin, Church, Rome. And they have our writings, which we all know. When the temple was destroyed, the church has our most sacred writings in their most authentic format. So they know Hebrew. Hebrew has always been studied by the Sitra Achra. Now, they don't have the Masorah. They don't know what they're reading. They're trying. English was apparently created on one foot to be the continuation from Latin, because Latin was, the scholarship was lacking. You have to invite the people to learn language. That's why there's always revolution. That's Marxist 101. Capitalism leads to Marxism. The church is capitalism. So there's always going to be a revolution. There's always going to be a new thing. And English was created and endorsed to be they call it, it's an what do you call it? Imperial language. All right, the British didn't conquer the Indians. It was more that the language was sent out to conquer the world. In a certain sense, okay, we're looking at it from a certain angle. And Latin was going to become, the driving force. The etymologies show that. With French loanwords, Greek loanwords, Hebrew loanwords, Latin loanwords. In English, by the figure 1200, like the Magna Carta is going to be written, and law. Still an archaic English. I think they call it Middle English. I forget the exact word. But the aristocrats, the nobility, the monarchies were all engaging in English. And I read something the other day that in Poland, they had a constitution at the time of our constitution in America, inspired by the same work. I forget what it's called. I think the Consulaire, or something like this. Written in a English, I think from around 1500. And the Polacks were upset that the English wanted to put one of their guys in power in Poland. So England wanted to spread the English language through the monarchies of the world. And the English Empire was very close connected in this regard with church thinking. Again, to what level, you're going to say that their denomination was different. I don't know. That's not where I'm going. We're saying that English was supported to become the replacement of the world language, which we know today it is, because Latin wasn't going to get it done. It's too scholarly, too heavy, too hard to speak. Too much like Hebrew, which is hard, which is why Hebrew was lost from the most part. English was created to become standardized. Arabic is obviously rivaling English and their own ambitions. Call it Klippa of Ishmael and Esav. Arabic came about the same way. The Quran gave us Arabic. Then they standardized it with grammar. Same format happened with Arabic. This is East versus West. China is not going to push their hieroglyphics on mankind. They don't want to. That's why they're never going to become an empire. Russia wants to be an empire, but Russia is not English. That's really the challenge there. The Imperial Russian language versus Imperial English. The entire West united against a Russian bloc will lose on the Russian bloc. And Germany obviously they feel they have the best language, and that's where their thing was World Wars 1 and 2 from a linguistic level. The linguistic level, as the book says, is politics. Politics are driven by language, not the other way around. And national identity. And we know Germans are very into German. And Germany was very into its own certain nationalism. Nazism was radical nationalism, is all it was. And the English put a stop to that. That was World War II. And now you have Zionism pushing modern Hebrew, which is very interesting. It's captivating a lot of people, but it's ultimately weak because modern Hebrew is a ripoff, and a very poor ripoff of biblical Hebrew. And it also takes loan words from Jewish and Yiddish and things like this, Ladino and all these things, and even Arabic. So English took off, and in around the time of Shakespeare, he rivaled the Bible. So you have the Bible giving its loan words, and Shakespeare. And then you have English. Now you have rhetoric, how English should be, what it could be. The great philosophies of grammar and vernacular, dialect, accent. By 1700s, you have global language wars. No one knew what to do. No one knew where to go, and we'll touch on that when we get to that part of the show. But to just continue the timeline, by the 1800s, English was beginning to look like we would write it today. You can read a book from the 1800s and more or less understand it. By the 1900s, grammar police were coming by and getting very serious about spelling, standardization. Our parents had a very rough time in the 50s and 60s. It was rigorous. That's why they're a bit rigid, that generation, because their language was rigid. And then you have a great spiritual decay in the language towards our generation. And the digital era blew it wide open, which I'll also leave that for later on in the show, when we absorbed not only global words, global cultures, the digital age, new vernacular, and the deterioration from things like Facebook, where people only copy, cut, and paste. Original thought is lost. And the English language today has become standardized with standard grammar, a lack of wisdom. No one knows what Shakespeare is. People don't understand the English of the Bible. Therefore, English is not a translation anymore. It's viable. It's all idiom-based. When you read a newspaper, a book, it's just strung together idioms. People are not actually speaking anymore. Therefore, we're living in the Tower of Babylon because we're no longer speaking or thinking for ourselves. We are using idioms. And if as you know, in Hebrew, a conversation would go like this. Shalom Ari, ma kore?
בסדר, אחי.
בסדר. איך אתה?
טוב, ואתה?
בסדר, כלום, שום בעיה.
טוב.
מה איתך?
בסדר.
כן?
כן, בסדר.
אין משהו חדש, לא?
לא.
טוב, מצוין. מה
מצוין.
what was that movie from the 90s? The guys that bashed their head. Was that Chris Kattan and Will Ferrell?
Oh,
what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Was that
right? The Night at the Roxbury.
That's what that is. Hey, sup? It's Israeli culture.
Yeah, good point.
So that's the timeline. That's the timeline. And so now I'll let you know where. Well, I'll let you dig from there. It's a gold mine.
Again, this is the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. We're talking about the English language. My guest is Rabbi David Katz from Sfat, co-author of the book The World of the Ger. Let's talk about globalization and the digital age. How does this relate to the English language?
I'll answer that, but I wanted to just say one thing.
Sure.
I got a lot of comments on Facebook. Yasha Koyach on you, Ari, for your working out picture. The buffness got a lot of attention. You're looking good.
Oh, thanks. Nice.
There's a shout out from our good friend in Brooklyn.
Oh, good. Okay.
All right. So this is crazy. We actually are led to believe that 2 billion people speak English, right? But when you have someone from the Philippines speaking English to you, Ari, they have no idea what you're talking about. When they talk to you, it's hey, what's up? That's all it is. And the book brought examples of newspaper clippings from around the world. It's just idiom, right? There's like a rock concert, right? How do you think the article started off? Just give me a couple of sentences how a Hong Kong article about a rock concert would start off.
Well,
as you would speak it. If you were to speak it, you were there. It was great, awesome. Go ahead and start the article, Ari.
Okay, there was a concert with a lot of attendees. It lasted a certain amount of time. It was considered very pleasant by the listeners. That type of thing.
Wait, what? Who? What? Who? that sounds like English you're talking right there.
Well, yeah.
Ready for this?
Okay.
Last night, screaming fans hit the pavements. Blah, 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 blah. Idiom, cliche, right? It's like this. I'm gonna quiz you. Ready for this, Ari? This will drive the point home.
Okay.
I'm gonna speak a bit racial here. Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
How would you compliment a white defensive end for the Washington Redskins?
I would say he played well and he played fundamentally, I guess.
His motor never stops, does it, Ari?
Right, yeah.
He's a high motor that never stops.
Right.
Yeah, and how would you say about, the black defensive end, who's also, noteworthy?
Well, usually they describe African American players as more athletic or stronger.
Right. The freak athleticism of
this they usually say it that way, yeah.
Right. And it's gross. It is gross. And so it gets to the point where these guys aren't even thinking about, why can't you say what he does good? Right? Hey, Bob Jones was a great defensive end at the University of Iowa. There he started and excelled in the track team, which is unique for a defensive end to be on a track team. Right? White or African American, or as Rich Hedberg says, I don't care if you're white, yellow, purple, or green. Right? And so that's the thing. They're not speaking English anymore. It's just plug in your idiom here. And so, how do you identify people at a rock concert? Well, the screaming fans hit the pavement. It doesn't say anything. You are told to say that. So when they teach, TESL, teaching English as a second language, they're just, and I taught for, are you working for Berlitz? Is that who it is?
No, I work for the Jerusalem Post.
So I was working for Berlitz. And this is what they do. It's like, the guys going to the airport. And you say, okay, so go ahead and say it. I go to airport. Are you going to the airport, or are you traveling to the airport? Oh, yes, I am traveling to airport. Are you going, is it an airport, or the central fly station, or whatever it is? But they grill into people this fundamental idiom-based. Now, I noticed I said black and you said African American, right? So we have globalization. You can't offend. PC, politically correct. So this is what the book spoke about. So you don't want to offend a word in Japan, in Russia, in Norway. So your English is being spread out globally, and you have to refrain from using words that may or may not offend people, right? Sexual, gender, instead of whatever. George Carlin had a whole thing about this. Post-traumatic stress disorder. It was originally shell shock, but that's too much. And then he had a whole thing about the exegesis and flow of how it became PTSD. Some kind of disorder. It's called shell shock, but it's offensive. We don't want to hear that. So English changes. It evolves. It grabs loan words. Let's say that shell shock brings offensive imagery from Vietnam. We don't want to insult the Vietnamese, people that died in combat. So we call it PTSD to not offend anybody. And it became a different language, watered down without meaning and content. And what you have is someone in Korea, they don't know, they never read the update that's called PTSD. They call it shell shock. And they don't even know what they're doing. They're just saying, 20 citizens were shell shocked at the terrorist blast in the mall. People would say, oh man, that's horrible. But they don't even know what they're saying. So then you bring in the digital age and the spreading of knowledge. There's no more, hey, how you doing? It's just, here, look at this, what happened in Jerusalem. Bah! Right? No one is explaining, hi, how you doing, ladies and gentlemen. It's just cut, paste, post. Then you don't even read it. You spell it wrong, get the link wrong. So you end up having a messed up language. There's corruption. The words are corrupted, spelling is corrupted, meaning's corrupted. Loan words from the digital age, download, startup, entrepreneur, all these new words, but radical new terms from social media being spread lightning fast on Twitter. There's no way the Filipino knows what the American is saying about the highlights of the Super Bowl. So in order to convey those ideas, we have to really dumb it down. It was an amazing touchdown catch. You can't even say, hey, Ari, he caught it in the corner of the end zone. Don't know what that means. I have no idea what you're talking about. What's an end zone? Did he score a goal? Was it a goal? Yes, it was a goal. So that it became global, 2 billion, but chances are of you understanding the guy next to you, probably impossible. Because now the contexts have changed. What you consider a great catch is not what I consider a great catch. I consider the immaculate reception a great catch. You might consider one of the great Super Bowl catches, Montana to Clark, as a great catch.
Right.
So my definition of great catch is not yours. But our culture does not want me to discuss it with you. That's already wisdom. I'm just supposed to say, hey, Ari, that was a great catch in the game yesterday, right? Yes, David, it was a great catch. Move on to next topic. That's not language. That's just idiom. How do you describe catch? It was a great catch. But Ari, you know sports better than anybody I know. I don't want to hear you on the air saying it was another great catch. Imagine the whole game. Oh, Roethlisberger to whoever, a great catch. Another great catch. Oh, look at that, great catch. Look at that, great catch. It's not. You have to know that that's the beauty of color commentary. Knowing the ins and outs. But our generation doesn't do that. And chances are, to make a great commentary, you have to be a bit offensive. Or, it would sound offensive, but not without being offensive. But it's then taken as offensive. So then the irony is, the cliches are offensive half the time. Then it becomes controversy. Left and right, Democrat, Republican. So that's the matzav. That's the status. And it's very, very strange place that we live in today.
Again, this is the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. The email is messiahhour@gmail.com. My guest is Rabbi David Katz, co-author of the book The World of the Ger. Last week, approximately, depending on when people hear this, was the Parsha of Noach, and the Tower of Babel is at the end of that Parsha. Are we currently living in the Tower of Babel era?
100%. 100%. We're looking for all the blogs. We're looking for Gog, and who's Gog, and what is Magog, and what is Armageddon, who's Armalus, and who's this. Man, just start looking for Nimrod. You're living in the Tower of Babylon. What the Tower of Babylon was, God went and confused their language because they were trying to get to God. World War II, whatever it was something like that. Those guys had ideologies that we can't understand, simply from an ideological standpoint. What came out of it was a technology that is today. And again, with Twitter and Facebook mentality of the letter U standing for the word you, the number 2 instead of the T-O-O, and then you misspell T-O-O and do it T-O, and then that gets copied and pasted. And then the next generation literally doesn't know when to use T-O-O and T-O, and I'm not being grammar police, but you got to know when to use T-O and when to use T-O-O. I'm sorry. They call that in the book prescriptivism, right? That it's like old school. And they say the opposite is descriptivism. Who cares? Let them talk. It's okay. And then people don't realize it's actually both. You have to have a little bit of old school and new school. But with that said, nobody understands anything. I don't think it's possible to teach Torah today. Everyone says it's hard. I don't get it. You're trying to translate Kabbalah, for example, into a broken English. All English is broken now. Now, English has potential to be accurate. You can speak. I'm not saying that when you speak Ari, I don't literally hear. I don't hear that. But I don't know what you mean. And if we're going to effectively communicate, really, when you say a word I don't know, and vice versa, we should stop the show, go to the Google etymology sites and look it up and get on the same page, make sure we have context, and then move forward. Now, that's not practical. And you're going to have to you're going to assume that you know what I'm saying. And vice versa. And people listening, you're probably not going to look up these things. And I'm going to give a reference that you don't know about. For example, a high-end motor, right? Or a high motor, non-stop motor by a defensive end. If you don't know football and sports center culture, you have no idea what I'm talking about. And you just BS yourself. Yeah, I get it. You don't get it. If you never heard Dan Patrick on Sports Center say this years ago in the 90s, you don't get it. And culture is rich with that. But we don't look it up, so we just kind of assume. And then you say the politician would say, they probably don't get it. I'm just going to leave out the good stuff. So I'm just going to say, wow, this football player who was a defensive player, he prevents the other team from scoring. He is a wonderful athlete, Ari. Very strong individual. I like him. Go team. Go team, go. And that's where we're at as a society. And even that, people say, what did he mean by go, team, go? What does that mean? Because it was where they internalized it, it meant something else. The bottom line is we are so far apart with this texting age and Facebook age, and everyone has their own limited view and a lack of life experience, because there's so many ways to absorb social media now. We basically have no clue what anyone's saying. But the irony is the wisdom's there. It's not lost. We have to go back to being scholars, and I believe that's what the Messianic era is getting reclamation of the wisdom that is never lost. We just have to find it, reconnect to it, and incorporate it, integrate it into our lives, speech, and basically resurrect vernacular and dialect and language, and that ultimately would lead to a greater revelation of God, because that would allow you to understand what spirituality speaks in.
Again, this is the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio, joined by Rabbi David Katz, co-author of the book The World of the Ger. Rabbi, let's talk about the concept of Sufra Bura. What exactly does that mean?
What's that? What was that?
I think Sufra Bura.
Safa Brura.
Okay, that's it. My Ashkenaz tongue has a hard time saying it.
Amish, Lachira, Safa Brura. There's a prophecy in Sophania. It's in the approbation of our book, The World of the Ger, available at gergear.com, $29.99. Just a little quick promo.
Nice. Good radio voice, too.
It's in our book, The Approbation. Because our book is all about the end of days and mankind being on the level to understand the real spirituality. And so the prophecy says that in the end time, I, Hashem, will switch for them, hafuch, their language into a safa brura, a clear. I don't want to translate safa. I'm going to tell you what it is, okay? Because it doesn't sound right to say tongue or language or. Ari, do you have Windows on your computer?
Yes.
And have you ever had it installed in Hebrew?
Not to my knowledge.
But if you wanted to, if it was in Hebrew, how would you get it to English?
I just click on a button, switch it to English usually.
Which button? It's called. You look for the tab called Safa.
Okay, right.
So imagine if I say that's Safa, right? I'm going to give them Safa Brura. Brura is now. I'm going to give you another little game to play. Have you ever learned the Mishnah Brura?
Yes, I have.
Okay, the Mishnah Brura is a very clear language to understand the Shulchan Aruch, correct?
I think so. Yeah.
Mishnah means teaching. Brura means clear teaching. So what is Safa Brura? You look at your Hebrew windows and you say, okay, I kind of get it. I can click here and it won't go batty on me. But if you get the Safa into English, your windows became Safa Brura, correct?
Yes.
So then in the end of days, God says, you're going to be in a situation of not Safa Brura. Like looking at Hebrew windows, I kind of get it. I think this means, copy, click. Okay, it didn't close the program, thank God. It's going to, all of a sudden, God is going to give Safa Brura. Your eyes will open. The path is there. That's called wisdom. The wisdom is without language. Wisdom is languageless. Therefore, anybody can get and incorporate wisdom. When you learn how to get and desire and seek and find wisdom and incorporate it in your not Safa Brura, you will receive instantaneously Safa Brura. Shakespeare is unintelligible. With wisdom, it becomes Safa Brura.
Okay, so with wisdom, and how would this relate to the English language?
So I'll take you back to our favorite time in history, 1740. 6 a.m. on the paradigm clock. Vilna Gaon, Vilna, with Baal Shem Tov, Ramchal, all of our friends in Kabbalah, Rashash. It's prophesied that's when the Industrial Revolution would begin, the Zohar says. At that time, English was on the cusp of being lost forever. Everyone was arguing. The rhetoric said, go my way. I know English better than all of them. Everyone was fighting. It was so many problems, just where we are today. No one understands. There's theories. There's language, philosophy. A guy in England by the name of Dr. Samuel Johnson wrote the most powerful literary dictionary ever conceived. It was one of the greatest accomplishments in lexicology ever. I actually bought it and I put it on my Kindle. He saved the English language. He was a bit of a messiah. I like to use that word messiah, right? Michael Jordan was the messiah of basketball. That's how I like to use that. Babe Ruth was the messiah of baseball, unless you consider steroids and his Barry Bonds. But there's always a messiah, right? There's always the archetype of the thing. Ari Lewis is the messiah hour. That was good.
Yeah.
Radio, messiah hour radio. You gotta love that. But Samuel Johnson was the messiah of the English language. English language we have today is because he fixed it. He fixed it, and it was like the Shulchan Aruch, right? What was the beauty of the Shulchan Aruch? Everybody accepted it. That's what we say about the Shulchan Aruch. It's not exactly true, but we say that. Lurianic Kabbalah. Everyone accepts Lurianic Kabbalah. That I think is true. No one says the Arizal Kabbalah wasn't the revelation that we're at today. Even the Ramak fans who came before the Arizal, people agree the Arizal is the proper pathway. So Dr. Samuel Johnson saved the English language, and he was the Safa Brura. And you should, if you ever get a chance to look it up on the internet or whatever, his language, it was great. I mean, you're reading ancient English, but in a very Safa Brura way, very clear way. And from that, we have English today that rectified from him. Not standardized. He didn't want to standardize it. In Halakha, there's the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch. Torah is just the collection. Shulchan Aruch is the production. Samuel Johnson was the collection. We now need the perfection. And Webster tried, didn't do it, but he furthered the program. Oxford has come and tried. They've helped, but society and mankind has made it impossible. Safa Brura. The Messiah, the Messianic end, is when language is fixed, rectified, politics will go out to the wayside, and finally, Scripture will be able to be understood. That is the Messianic end. That is the elimination of Gog and Magog. It really goes down to that. That's why it's King David. King David was our Shakespeare. Tehillim is David's contribution, which, if anybody has studied Psalms, man, he is Shakespeare. He introduced so much wisdom from Hebrew that has allowed us to understand Moses' Torah. Moses was the language master, which goes back to Shem. The Messiah is when the language mastery emerges with the highest revelation of Safa Brura to the lack or to the negation of an idiom-based language to a wisdom-based language.
Again, this is the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest is Rabbi David Katz, co-author of the book The World of the Ger. Last question we have for you, Rabbi, not to get all conspiratorial with you, but there is a conspiracy theory. The church was behind the English language and kind of some of the things you're talking about. Is that accurate?
I think you have to say it. Again, it's like half conspiracy. But conspiracy is when you know there's conspiracy, but you guess wrong. Because everything is a conspiracy, right? It's a total conspiracy. This radio show is a conspiracy. Because in reality, if it was not a conspiracy, theoretically I could insult Ari, and he could just say, like, you know what, Rabbi Katz, take you and your bogus stuff out of here. I'm out of here. Click. Is that possible to happen, Ari?
It's technically possible, but it's not going to happen.
No, because we conspired beforehand.
Okay.
Ari called me up, said, are you ready? Yeah, I'm ready. And we discussed what we're going to say. right? It's not we actually decided today we're going to freestyle the whole thing. And we did. But we have a friendship, right? We have a relationship off the radio. Friends, companions over the internet, over the common interests. So for me to upset Ari, I would have to really do things consistently bad and offensive, and it wouldn't be just P-tome in the middle of the show, right? Unless I really did something out of line. But the chances are, there's a pre-existing something. So that's kind of what conspiracy is, right? I mean, there's more to the show than meets the eye. There's more to this than people know. And that's just, I mean, football is the same thing, right? Is football a conspiracy? Absolutely. I mean, aside from cheating, we practice this play 100 times. I know the defensive back is not going to be able to know the back of the end zone is where I'm going. It's a conspiracy. It wasn't like, Peyton Manning dropped back and said, hey, look at that. I just realized that he's open over there. Peyton Manning studied the video for hours and hours to know that. It was a conspiracy. So, it's not so much of conspiracy like, Illuminati, NWO. What it is there's a church. We know that. They spoke Latin. We know that. Latin, by the definition of the nature and reality of language, will die. We know that. They have to continue going. They're not going to say, well, we tried. Language did us in, boys. Okay, the Jews were right. Sorry, go home. Not going to happen. So how are you going to continue to stay in power? English language. So the church endorses English. It spread through Europe, which was where the church was based, and still is. And it spread. Now, the church may have a personal interest, not England, and in Latin. Or now with the Pope, it's maybe it's Spanish. But it's a capitalist enterprise. It's a corporation. Corporation comes from the word the Christ body. That's where that comes from in the etymology. And that is it's an engine, and it makes money. Money is and again not conspiracy. It just there is money by any way you want to look at it. So you can see that the New Testament is what brought English into its beginning of being what do you call it? Not magnificent, but it expanded to fantastic breadth. Right? All of a sudden, by the translation of the Bible. Well, that is a church document. So obviously the church was well involved, and you can find through the history of the English language where the church was obviously involved, and it obviously came from the church going from Latin to English. So is it conspiracy? Not so much. Is it conspiracy? Yeah. They're behind it. Is it probably more than we know? Yeah. But can we identify it specifically? No. Is there a consequence right this second? No. But is there really? Yeah. So it's touch and go. It's worth watching. It's worth following. It's worth researching. It's highly interesting. It's a source of great wisdom. And I think it's a kosher way to explore conspiracy rather than putting up devil horns, the Jew conspiracy, NWO, Illuminati, Babylonian Kabbalah. I say, they say in religion, follow the money. I say in Torah, Kabbalah, spiritual, looking for, where the backside infiltrates the front side, follow the language. That's where it is every time.
All right. Well, there you go. A little bit of an English lesson for all you kids out there listening, and all you grown-ups. Everyone out there can always learn more about the language. In its current state, it's the most popular form, whether it's bastardized or not, and hopefully things will change with the real Emet language, which is original Hebrew, biblical Hebrew. That's what God spoke to everybody. Again, this is another episode of the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. Emails messiahhour@gmail.com. If you'd like to make a donation, you can do so through PayPal, israelsportsradio@yahoo.com. My guest has been Rabbi David Katz, co-author of the book The World of the Ger. His websites are gergear.com and solmazal.com. Rabbi, thank you for being on the program. Great job as always.
Thanks for having me back, Ari, and make sure you teach the right language.
I'll do my best. God forgive me, and people forgive me if I don't, but just try to do what I can. And everyone out there, again, thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay strong, and, of course, shalom from Israel.